Welcome, Katie. I'm so excited to have you as a guest on my podcast. How are you today?
I am really good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I really looked forward to our conversation because we have quite a few things in common. I stalked you a little bit on your website. So you love nature, just like me. You're plant-based eating, just like me. You're rescuing dogs, just like me.
Yes.
So now, besides all that, tell us a little bit. Who is Katie and where in the world are you? Because I read something interesting about you around that too.
Okay, who am I? So my name is Katie Allen. I am a coach. I've been coaching for about 5 years now, primarily around self-love and body image. And I'm sure we will get into that a little bit more later on, but that really is my thing. That is my passion. That is my love. I am also, I love to do yoga. I am plant-based. I meditate most days. And I love traveling, love traveling. It is like, there's like the travel bug. I don't know. I got like the supersized travel bug. Like I cannot help myself. So I am Canadian. I am currently staying with family in Canada, just outside of Toronto, in Ontario, but I have actually been living overseas in Australia for the last 7 years.
Yeah, I read that.
And very well may end up back there in the near future. I just not a lover of winter. Being in Canada, it's not really, avoidable. So it's a bit about me.
Yeah, I read that about Australia. And I just also read somewhere that they're opening the borders now. So your chances are increasing.
Yes, I can. I've looked into all the technical stuff. I can get back in. Yes, finally.
Yeah. Awesome. That's really awesome. As you mentioned already, our topic is self-love and body image. And when I came across you, I knew I wanted to have you on the podcast because, I always, like, one of my sayings is decluttering is self-love. And when I come across somebody whose podcast is called How to Ignite Self-Love or Ignite Self-Love, and also who coaches people around self-love, I knew I had to have you on a podcast. So tell me a little bit, how did this even happen? Like, there must be a reason that you coach people on self-love.
Definitely. I don't think, I'm sure you are probably the same. I don't think there's many of us who talk about self-love if it's not a deeply personal reason, right? Like nobody does this just on a whim. Oh, I'm just going to talk about self-love now. Like, no, it's because, I've gone through this story myself. So, I mean, my story, essentially, if I sort of go back, I was always the chubby kid from when I was like 3 years old, 2 years old, 3 years old. I was like the chubby kid. I was the fat kid. Started being self-conscious about my body when I was 3 or 4. I started covering myself up, even from my parents, like in the bath, which is, 3 or 4, like you wouldn't even think that a child of that age has that sort of awareness around being self-conscious, but I did. And then as I grew up, I was bullied a lot and I was picked on, and I always just felt like I didn't belong. And I was, as a teenager, painfully shy. I was the wallflower, but to the extreme. I was like in the corner, not speaking to anybody, didn't date, didn't do any of the like sort of typical teenage things, because I felt so deeply uncomfortable in my body and with what I looked like. But along with that, I felt like there was something wrong with who I was. I felt like I didn't have any self-worth. I didn't believe in myself. I was very smart as a teenager as well. I got pretty decent grades, but I intentionally chose to take the easy classes because I didn't think I could do the hard stuff. I didn't think I could go to university. I didn't think that I had the ability. So I just downplayed everything. That followed me into my 20s. I had quite a few relationships that were not in my best interest because I was, just anybody who showed me any attention, I was going for them. And I mean, for years in my 20s, I just remember crying myself to sleep and just feeling awful about who I was, and like nobody would ever love me, and always die. I went on my first diet when I think I was 11. So constantly dieting, constantly trying to lose weight, constantly trying to change my body. And I was in my late 20s that it was the first time I went to Australia, actually. I just decided, I was like, I need to go. I'd always wanted to go. And I decided to go, and it was the scariest thing I ever did, but also so life-changing, because I bought a plane ticket to go to Australia by myself. And I quit my job where I'd been for 6.5 years. And I left my partner who I was with at the time. He stayed, like he was working, he stayed in our apartment. I got on a plane and I went around the world by myself, and it was terrifying, but it also, for the first time in my life, I realized how strong I was, how capable I was, how resilient I was, how good I was at making friends. And it was really this beautiful sort of beginning of me learning who I was again. And in learning who I was, that set me off on, what did that mean about my body and how I felt about myself, and sort of, it started the spiral into me realizing who I was, and completely transforming how I feel about myself. And I know now, as I sit here in front of you, I can say without any hesitation that I love who I am. I love who I am. I love my body. I don't always love what I look like, but I love my body. And there's a key difference there, right? I love who I am, and I love my body. And as I've had this transformation, it has changed all of my relationships. It has changed my career path. It has changed my goals and my hopes and my dreams. And I want that for other people. I want that expansion for other people. It's a very long answer to your question, but
no. Well, I expected that there is quite the story behind it, because as you also said, like, somebody is not just helping other people with self-love from one morning waking up and thinking, oh, that might be a good idea.
Yeah, exactly.
So before I forget, I want to really go into this real quick, what you said about you love your body, but you don't always love how you look. So that difference, because I think I have not come across any single woman. I don't know 100% about men, but I have not come across any single woman who says she never struggled with her body image, or with her loving her body or loving herself. So tell me, because we're so trained by society, by media, by however all these they are called, to criticize our body and our how we look to no end. So tell us the difference, please.
So the difference for me really is the change in perspective of, I used to think that I was my body, that me and my body were one and the same. And this is really common. I think women tend to do this more, but our body image and our self-image sort of merge as one, right? So if it's like, so if we have this idea that I'm too fat, then that equals I am lazy. If we have this idea that I am, I've let myself go, then that equals like I'm not good enough and I'm worthless. And like, as soon as our body changes, how we see ourselves changes. And for me, I really had to do a lot of work to disconnect those two, that I am a being, I am a soul, I am a spirit that lives inside my body, but I am not my body. They are different. So, I always like to say, like, I could shave my head and I would still be me. I could lose a limb and I would still be me. Like my body does not define me. So, I mean, I'm still like, I have cellulite, I have wrinkles, I have gray hair, I have rolls, I have all of those things that most of us have. And I'm not looking in the mirror and going like, ooh, check out that cellulite. Like that's not that's not when I say I love my body, I'm not saying I love my cellulite and I love my dimples. What I'm saying is I can look in the mirror and say, I'm so lucky to have this body who is here, that allows me to live my life. I'm so lucky to have this body that wakes up every morning. My lungs are working, my heart is beating, my nervous system is working. So when I say I love my body, I love all of that. Cellulite, I can give or take. It's not really part of the equation anymore.
I think it's very important, but again, I think like we're so brainwashed and so fed constantly. Like, just look the whole discussion constantly around people who either gain weight or lose weight, and what what the media's message, or what even we think. Even I catch myself sometimes, because we all grew up with this, no? And so we're just, Adele comes to mind right now, all this huge discussion around her and this and that and everything. And yeah, and then and I feel too that, and I say this a lot on this podcast, this is also something we don't learn, because our parents probably didn't learn it either. So we don't learn that we are not our body, we're living in our body, and the body's function is not necessarily to look pretty. The body's function is to live and to breathe and to move us and to function for us. And we're just taking this all, or we're dismissing it because of a little bit of cellulite on our butt or something, you know?
Yeah. And I think what you said there too about, like, you know, our parents didn't like our parents didn't know, like our parents didn't grow up with social media either.
Yeah.
Right. Like, as long as there has been media and social sort of structures of how we quote unquote should look, there has been pressures, there has been, you know, magazines and things like that. So different generations, I think, have experienced this differently.
Yeah.
I just feel like probably in the last, you know, 20 years or so, as social media has become what it is today and it continues to grow, those pressures are just multiplying so much faster than we can even comprehend, really.
Yeah. And what we're also forgetting is that there were other beauty images, to call it that, before. Like, there was a time when women that were skinny were encouraged to eat more, to be more round, you know, and that is not even that long ago. We don't even have to go far that much. And it's the idea that actually society or the media can tell us how our body has to be, instead of us just accepting how our body is mind-boggling in a way.
It sure is. I know, it really is. When you can take a step back and look at the bigger picture, it is kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean. If you go out and you're just looking at this objectively, you're like, wait a second.
It's true, because if you go back to, you know, like ancient Rome, and you look at the statues and like the Greek goddesses, and they had little wrinkles, they had hip dips, they had, you know, big bums and thighs and tummies, and that was considered beautiful, right? They were goddesses. That was like the ultimate woman. And then yes, we've gone through times in history where women were meant to be, you know, like stick thin and have no curves. And then think of, you know, the 50s and Marilyn Monroe, and like, you know, curves came back in, and she would, if she was alive today, she would be very much a plus size woman.
Which is ridiculous.
Which is ridiculous, right? And then, you know, there was like then like Twiggy came in like in the 60s, and the stick thin again, and like it just has gone back and forth so much. And so if we're trying to constantly like strive to be quote unquote beautiful, what is that even? It's always changing. Like, you're never going to get there. There is no finish line. It's a race you cannot win. Ever.
Exactly. And I can say for myself, I always felt like I was chubby, but when I look back at the photos that I have from me growing up, like as also like teenager, when you, like you said, you did your first diet at 11. I don't remember, but I mean, when I look back, I'm like, I see a normal kid, like with, and even also during my 20s, I was always somehow on a diet, or always somehow trying to improve something. And when I look at these photos, I'm thinking like, she's just perfect the way she was, like, you know, like, and back then I know how bad I felt about myself. And it's so ridiculous when you think about it. I mean, not that because for me it was very real, but I mean, the whole concept is so ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so you're helping women now. I read mostly women. Is that because you are a woman, or because men don't have that issue? Or
not at all. Not at all.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yes. So I do work primarily with women, and that simply is because I identify, you know, I am a woman. I identify as a woman, and I think for most of us, it is easier to go through this process with somebody who we can identify with.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I have worked with men, and men absolutely struggle with the same things.
Yeah.
I think it is unfortunately not spoken about nearly as much. It's not as acceptable, right? It's like, as women, we almost expect, like you said, it's like you don't know, you don't think you even know a woman who hasn't at some point struggled with body image, struggled with self-love. And I would agree with you. Like, I don't even know if that woman exists anymore in today's world.
I don't know either.
But I think men struggle with the same thing, but they just don't talk about it. They just don't talk. I remember years ago, one of my first male clients, he was in his 50s, marathon runner, like really confident on the outside. He was a dad. He had a career. He was really good. And when we got down to it, he was so deeply insecure about how he looked and his face. And he just hated how he looked. And it was holding him back in so many ways because of the lines on his face.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And he felt like he didn't belong and he looked too old. And then there was all these stories and beliefs and low self-worth attached to it. And that was very healing for me to understand that this really is universal. It shows up differently. But I mean, I definitely do work with men, but I identify primarily with women.
Yeah, of course. I was just wondering, and you just answered actually my follow-up question, because it's a little similar for me too, and I think it has to do with that it's not as much talked, that men have similar problems. So most of my clients are also female when they struggle with clutter. That also often maybe has still to do with women are responsible for the household or responsible to keep order in the house, and the men don't have to. But I definitely had men too, and they sometimes struggle with the same things, or some men are very sentimental and have a hard time letting go of things, or have anxiety. But of course, it's not talked so much, because that again would then put them kind of like in a light that society doesn't like about the strong man. No, so yeah, it's I was interested in your experience there.
Yeah.
So when we go, and I call it a journey, so I always say too, is like decluttering is not an event, it's a journey that you go on, and it's not something you solve overnight. And I'm pretty sure it's the same with this self-worth, self-image, self-love. Well, I know from experience from myself, but I think you as a coach can confirm it's not. We go to Katie, we book a few coaching calls, and then we come out the other end.
No.
As a new person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, if I could do that, if there was some like magic trick or like a switch that I could just turn on or turn off, I mean, I would love that, obviously. But no, I always say, like, it is a journey, and the journey is different for everybody. And I mean, to that note, I also, like, I am still on this journey, and I believe that I will be on it until the day I die. I believe as long as I am on this planet and I am breathing and my heart is beating, I am going to continue to evolve. Because when we're talking about all of this, essentially what we're talking about is our relationship with ourselves. Right? You can label it whatever you like, but it is about your inner ecosystem, your inner relationship. And just like every other relationship, we have throughout our lives, every day there's something new and a new conversation, and you're going to have good days and bad days. And then you'll have an argument and you won't talk for a little while, and then you'll make up, and then you'll have fun. And it's just like that with yourself. And, when I work with clients, what we're really doing is creating a foundation that you can build upon. That's the idea, because I am still on this journey. I'm a little bit farther ahead. I have more tools, I have more insight, but it is a journey. And what I want for my clients is that they feel like they have the tools, they have something to reach for that is going to help them rise up, so that they can unpack whatever limitations they have inside their head, understand that the stories they're telling themselves are just that. They are stories, they're not truths. And that they can sort of step out of that and not get sucked into that sort of like spiral of judgment and feeling awful about themselves anymore.
It's so interesting how similar the conversations are, because like most people I help with that think they have a problem with physical clutter discover that they're actually having a problem with what I call mental and emotional clutter, which is so similar of what you just talked about, the stories in their head that don't serve us, that maybe they're not even ours. We heard them somewhere and got convinced that those are true for some reason. But if we actually really would go underneath, we would realize we don't really think they're true. We just think we have to believe they're true or some. Yeah. And so it's so interesting. And I say too, like with decluttering, as I mentioned, it's a journey. And that's also why I always say, like, I have clutter too. I may not have the physical clutter piled up in my home like others, but one of the reasons why I'm on this decluttering journey has to do with my mental clutter and my emotional clutter that comes from not loving myself the way I am for all the reasons we just talked about.
Yeah.
And in my life, it may not express itself in a full or a house full of clutter. It expresses itself in a different way. So we're talking very much about the same things. So I always try to give my listeners of the podcast some kind of a practical takeaway. So what would you tell someone where he or she, because we want to include everybody, or they, could start with going on this journey? What's the first step on this journey in your eyes, in your opinion?
All right. So one step, so everybody's journey is different, yes. But one common step that I don't think I have ever not taken this with somebody, whether it's step 1, whether it's step 5, but this is something that everybody can do. Use curiosity instead of judgment. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is essentially when we are in this place, right, we're judging ourselves for whatever your judgment happens to be, right? You're too fat, you're too old, you're not good enough, you're lazy, you fill in the blank, right? Like we all have whatever that judgment is.
Yeah.
And then what we end up doing is we judge ourselves for judging ourselves. Right? Then it's like, why are you being such a horrible person? Why are you bullying yourself? Why are you doing this? So we judge ourselves for having judged ourselves. And judgment works in this, like, it's like a feedback loop. It just feeds into itself. And the longer it goes, the stronger it gets. And it just brings us down more and more. So to stop that, we use curiosity. Curiosity is like, it pulls you out. And curiosity is essentially as simple as going, isn't it interesting that I think I'm lazy? Mm-hmm. Isn't it interesting that I'm labeling myself as not enough? Mm-hmm. Isn't it interesting that I feel like I can't measure up to anybody else? I wonder where that story came from. Mm-hmm. I wonder where this belief has come from. And simply by doing that, you are removing yourself from the endless loop of judgment, and you are opening yourself to new possibilities. Mm-hmm. And those new possibilities include kindness, include respect, include understanding, compassion. And that is where growth comes from, right? So for everybody who's listening, that is my one thing. Do your best to introduce curiosity into your inner ecosystem.
I love that. That's such a valuable tip. And something I had to learn too, because like I said, lots and lots of limiting beliefs, negative self-talk, mm-hmm. putting myself down, judging myself harsher than anybody ever could. So such a great tip. Where could people find you if they wanted to now, or if they're intrigued and they wanted to learn more, or maybe even hire you? Where could they find you? Where would you send them?
So my website is probably the easiest place to go, and it's just my name. So it's katieallen.co. Mm-hmm. And then I'm also very active on Instagram. Instagram is my favorite. I love Reels right now. Instagram or Facebook. I am Katie Allen Coaching on both of them.
Yeah, and you have a podcast too. You want to maybe mention that real quick?
And I have a podcast as well. Yes, and I have a podcast. My podcast is called Self-Love Ignited. And Connie, you are going to be a guest on my podcast as well in the near future. But yes, so my podcast is Self-Love Ignited, and it is on all of the major podcast platforms as well.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. I hope a lot of people come and check you out, because I think it's above all, it's such an important uh task. I don't want to call it task, but a journey to better the relationship we have with ourselves, and questioning the thoughts and realizing the thoughts are not ours, they're just thoughts. And we don't have to believe them all. And yeah, so I hope people hear this and can receive it. Do you have any last words? Maybe something I didn't ask you that you would like to say, or just something that comes out of you that you feel needs to be said before we wrap up?
I think the one thing I would say is that a lot of times, I hear from people like, how is this going to change my life on a practical level? Because we're all busy, right? We have lives, we have families, we have friends, we have jobs. Like we all have a lot going on. And I think it can feel really intimidating standing on the outside going like, what am I getting into? And what's in it for me? How am I going to benefit? And so I would really just say, number one, you get to go at your own speed. But number two, the beautiful flow on effects from learning to accept yourself and be more kind to yourself are absolutely endless. And this is going to positively impact every single area of your life without fail. Your relationships, your career or your business, your money, your spirituality, your health, physical health, your mental health. It is going to have a positive impact on everything, and you are always in the driver's seat. So if you're feeling any anxiety around this idea of this journey, take a deep breath and know that you're in control, and that only good things will come from this.
Beautiful words. I'm not saying anything. Thanks so much, Katie, for coming on my podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Connie. It's been great.